What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be testing out all of the barrel attachments in Battlefield 2042, as a lot of the attachments in this game kind of just don't really do what they say they do in the descriptions. So we're going to be going through and actually showing you guys exactly what these different attachments do and how they change your weapon overall. Now, if you guys missed it, I did actually test the underbarrel attachments last week, or at least the grips anyway, and I kind of just went through and showed all of the recoil changes, both static and moving tests, and we essentially figured out which of the underbarrel grips is actually the best in the game. So if you guys haven't seen that, be sure to go and check that one out. And a week after this video goes up, I'm actually going to be testing the scopes in the game, because I have heard some rumors that apparently they do actually change the stats of the weapon, which they shouldn't. They're only meant to be visual changes, but apparently they do actually change the recoil patterns of your weapon. So be sure to check out that underbarrel video and then keep your eyes peeled for the scope video. And on top of that, if you guys are new to the channel, then definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. There's going to be plenty more content like this on the way in 2022. But with that being said, let's get stuck into the video. So like I said, in this video we're going to be going through all of the barrel attachments in 2042. We're going to be testing a bunch of different things like the recoil changes, what the suppressors actually do, because those actually don't do what they say they do in the descriptions, and then we're also going to test the rate of fire changes on the barrels. The video is going to be essentially split up into 3 different sections. Firstly, we're going to be testing the regular barrels against each other, so the regular barrel, the shortened barrel, and the extended barrel, just going through the recoil changes as well as the rate of fire changes. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for the brakes and the compensators in the game. And then lastly, in the most important section of the video, we're going to be going through the suppressors and going through the recoil changes that they make to the weapons, as well as actually going through something that, if you guys haven't seen it, it's going to be an absolute shock to you. Jack Frags did actually do a video sort of touching on this a little bit, so some of you guys might know what I'm talking about, but some of the suppressors don't actually remove you from the minimap, at least in certain situations anyway. So we're going to go through all of that as well, so be sure to stick around to the end of the video, because the suppressors are definitely the most important part of the video. Now lastly, not every weapon has every single type of barrel, so I'm going to be testing between the M5A3 and the MP9. The M5A3 has pretty much all the different types of barrels and the compensators and brakes, but it doesn't have all of the suppressors, so I'll switch to the MP9 for those suppressors. With all of that context out of the way though, guys, let's get stuck right into the test, and we're going to be starting off with the regular barrels, comparing them to each other in terms of the recoil as well as the rate of fire. So the different types of barrels that you guys can see here are the regular barrel, which is just like the factory barrel, that's the one on the left there. There's then also the shortened barrel, which is in the middle there, and then the extended barrel over on the right. Now the regular barrel makes absolutely no changes to your weapon. The shortened barrel will increase your rate of fire at the cost of a slower bullet velocity, and then the extended barrel does the exact opposite. It actually just increases your velocity while reducing your rate of fire. Now, as you can see from the results here, we actually have some pretty different results. The extended barrel over on the right there, that actually does seem to make your weapon a lot more accurate. The recoil pattern across all 3 are essentially the exact same, but obviously it's a lot tighter on that extended barrel. And then even the shortened barrel, that looks to me a lot tighter than the regular barrel over on the left. So weirdly enough, the regular barrel seems to be essentially redundant at this point. It's less accurate than both of the others, and it actually has no positives as well, so it seems essentially useless to use now. Whereas the shortened barrel, it is a little bit tighter, it's definitely less accurate than the extended barrel, but it does come with a faster rate of fire, so it's definitely better for close quarters. And then the extended barrel actually does what it says it does, and it makes it a little bit more accurate at that cost of a slower rate of fire. Nothing too crazy there, to be honest. They seem to do essentially what they say they do, except for maybe the regular barrel. That seems like it actually makes the weapon worse, so that one's a little bit surprising. But the extended barrel and the shortened barrel look to do pretty much exactly what they say they do. And in the background, you guys can just see me sort of shooting with each different barrel and showing you guys the difference in the rate of fire. The shortened barrel will increase the rate of fire by 50 rounds per minute, and the extended barrel will decrease it by 50 rounds per minute. So that's pretty much it for the regular types of barrels. Next up, we have the compensators and the muzzle brakes. All the way on the left, we have the tactical compensator. Second from the left is the Warhawk compensator. Second from the right is the Arcom tactical muzzle brake, and then all the way on the right is the Champion muzzle brake. Now, I did test all of these out in terms of the rate of fire as well, and they don't change anything other than the vertical or horizontal recoil. So these don't do anything to do with the rate of fire or anything like that. It's only to do with the recoil. As you can see, the muzzle brakes over on the right there, they are absolutely terrible. Like, that just makes the weapon a lot worse. Obviously, it has a lot less vertical recoil, but it actually comes with quite a bit more horizontal recoil, whereas the two on the left, they are definitely more accurate in terms of the horizontal recoil, but the vertical recoil is a little bit higher. So once again, these actually are doing what they say they do, which is kind of surprising. After testing the underbarrels, I kind of thought these would be a bit of a mess, but actually these are actually doing what they say they do. So once again, just like the regular barrels, there's actually nothing too weird about these tests. But what I will say is that I think the tactical compensator, to me, that definitely seems like the best out of all 4 of these. Sure, it does have a lot more vertical recoil, but vertical recoil is a lot easier to handle than the horizontal recoil, and it just seems to be a lot tighter in general. So the results of the test aren't weird or anything like that, but I will say that at least we now know that the tactical compensator is probably the best out of all four of these. Obviously, it probably just comes down to personal preference, because you might find it harder to, control the vertical recoil, so maybe you actually like the ones on the right. But for me personally, tactical compensator or probably the Warhawk compensator are the two that I would go with if I'm going to choose any of these four attachments. Now, moving on to, like I said, the most important part of this video, we're going to be touching on the suppressors. As I mentioned, the M5A3 and a lot of weapons in the game don't actually have all four of the suppressors in the game. Some of them only have two, which are actually the light suppressors, whereas the MP9 actually has all four. So we're going to be changing over to the MP9, and as you can see, we have the 6KU suppressor all the way over on the left. We have the wrap suppressor second from the left. We have the PB heavy suppressor second from the right, and then we have the Type 4 heavy suppressor on the right. Now, this one is a pretty resounding result here. The Type 4 heavy suppressor is clearly way more accurate than the rest of them. It almost seems like it has only vertical recoil to it. Obviously, right at the top there, it does sort of spray a little bit more, but pretty much the entire way up, it is just way more accurate than the rest of them. So after testing this, and I did test this on a few other weapons as well, I'm going to come out straight away and say that the Type 4 heavy suppressor is absolutely the best suppressor in the game. And essentially, if you're going to be running a suppressor, I would definitely recommend using the Type 4. With that being said, however, like I mentioned, the M5A3 and plenty of other weapons in the game, they actually only have the light suppressors, not the heavy ones. And so in some cases, you're only going to be able to choose from those two over on the left there. And in that case, I would probably recommend the wrap suppressor over the 6KU suppressor. It seems to be a little bit tighter, and it doesn't really have any more vertical recoil either. So if you can't use the heavy suppressors, I would recommend the wrap suppressor. But with that being said, this final test is going to show you guys something that, like I said, if you've watched Jack Fragg's video on this, you will already know what I'm talking about, but this is going to probably blow some of your minds if you haven't seen that video. Now, obviously, suppressors in not only Battlefield 2042, but any shooter, they are meant to suppress your weapon. You're not meant to show up on the minimap. They're obviously going to make your weapon quieter in general. And in the description of every single one of these suppressors in the game, they do mention that they take you off the minimap. However, there is actually something a little bit weird, which I'm not too sure if it's a bug or if this is actually intended. And I'm going to show you guys what I mean here. This test you can see is the Type 4 heavy suppressor, which is the one that I mentioned is the best for accuracy anyway. So this is already the best suppressor in the game. And as you can see, when I'm shooting here, it's not showing up on the minimap. So the enemy's weapon there is suppressed, and that's working exactly as intended. This next test is also with another heavy suppressor, which is the PB heavy suppressor. And once again, exact same result. The enemy isn't showing up on the minimap. Like I said, from the recoil test, I wouldn't recommend using this one over the Type 4 because the other one is just way more accurate and they do essentially the same thing otherwise. But regardless, this one is doing what it's meant to do. Now, this next test is using the 6KU suppressor, which, as I mentioned, is the light suppressor, and this is one that's only available on a weapon like the M5A3, or it's available for all weapons, but the M5A3 can only choose from these two light suppressors. And as you can see, the suppressor is attached, and the enemy is actually still showing up on the minimap here. So the suppressors actually don't work as they say they do in the description. Now, just like Jack Frags mentioned in his video, once you actually get to a certain distance, though, they do start to work. The distance seemed to be 20 meters from my testing here, and so once you are at 20 meters or beyond from an enemy with a light suppressor, they will still be suppressed. But as you can see, once I move forward, the shots are actually starting to show up on the minimap. So there is kind of a fatal flaw there with the light suppressors in that they do, at a long range, they do exactly what they should, but when you're actually within 20 meters of an enemy, they're actually not doing anything at all. And especially with the two light suppressors, they didn't have very good accuracy either, as we can see from the tests. And so within 20 meters, these are essentially redundant. There's pretty much no point in using them when you're in like a really close quarters area. And it isn't just the 6KU as well. You can see here the tests with the wrapped suppressor as well, and the results are exactly the same. So on a weapon like the M5A3, for example, as I mentioned, you cannot use those two heavy suppressors. So these are the only two options, and within 20 meters, you're going to be showing up on the minimap of the enemy, even if you have that suppressor equipped. So like I said, that is a pretty big fatal flaw for these different attachments. And although Jack Frags has already covered that, I wanted to kind of go in depth on not only that, but also the difference in the recoil as well. The suppressors are easily some of the most important attachments that you can use in any game, because they kind of change the most drastic element in that they're meant to take you off the minimap. But as you can see, these ones aren't working as they actually say in the description. Now, personally, I don't think this is actually a bug, because it does seem to be 20 meters with both, and it seems like that is meant to be the difference between the light suppressors and the heavy suppressors. And And you might be asking yourself, well, what's the point in even having those ones if the heavy suppressors are obviously better, but some weapons, like I mentioned, they don't have those heavy suppressors. So I think DICE has kind of put this in here to maybe be a bit of a balancing feature where there are just going to be certain weapons that you can't avoid this, you can't use those heavy suppressors. I don't necessarily agree that that's the way to balance things if that's what they're trying to do, but I actually don't think this is a bug. I think this is just meant to be the difference between the light suppressors and the heavy suppressors. At the end of the day, it doesn't really make the light suppressors completely redundant because, for example, on a more of a long range weapon, for example, if you're using the M5A3 past that 20 meter range, then it is still going to do its job. But yeah, if you get caught in a close quarters area, then they're essentially useless to you. And I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention because it does often feel like you're using a suppressor, and I didn't know this before. I actually only watched Jack Fragg's video right before I actually made this video because I had heard a few people talk about it, but I actually didn't know what he was referring to. And so there's been plenty of times using, for example, the M5A3 where I felt like I should have been hidden on the minimap, and obviously someone knew that I was there somehow. I just assumed maybe they heard me from my actual bullets, but no, they probably actually saw me on the minimap. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, guys. Hopefully that helps you when it comes to choosing which suppressors you can use. Essentially, my tip is that if you can use a heavy suppressor, there's literally no reason to be using a light suppressor. The Type 4 heavy suppressor had the best recoil, and it also doesn't show you on the minimap within 20 meters. So the Type 4 is the best in my opinion. It seemed to have the absolute best recoil, not only on the MP9, but I did also test it on the AC42. And so yeah, the Type 4 is definitely the best one in my opinion. PB heavy suppressor probably comes in next, but it did have a fair bit of recoil. And then the two light suppressors, they are, they're still worth using in certain situations, but it is definitely worth knowing as well that they're not always working as you might think they are. If you guys did enjoy the video, definitely hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. If you do want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.